So, hi everybody. For people listening on the eventual Odyssey and YouTube upload, this is the stream that I've been talking about for the past couple of days, covering the Serbian and the Hungarian elections. I am joined for this stream by a very noisy, panting dog. Do forgive me if he makes his presence known throughout the stream in the background. But I am joined by Peter, who is a Hungarian. So, Peter, if you want to say hello.
Hi, hi.
Yep. And I'm also joined by Milo, who is a Serb.
What's up?
Yep. So the three of us are just going to have a quick chat about the elections in their respective countries. And I'm hoping to kind of flesh this out into the wider events that are happening in Russia and Ukraine and the effects of the war on their countries. So just with that note, I'll just quickly fire up the screen share. Apologies, I forgot to up. Go. Yes. So with that, I guess we'll just allow the two guys to properly introduce themselves. So, Peter, do you want to sort of give us a quick rundown on yourself, or?
Yeah. So, definitely a right winger, but I'm trying to be as objective as one can be. Um, I have no other affiliation than Simple Water, and no. So I'm not a journalist or anything. So
Okay,
that's
so
that.
I guess mostly what I'm sort of asking is did you, because you're in Hungary at the moment, so did you vote?
Yep.
And if you feel comfortable,
Oh yeah.
who did you vote for and why?
Oh, I'm definitely comfortable. I voted for the government parties. You say we have an MMP system, so we have two votes, one for a first past post system and one for proper proportional system, and I gave them both to the government parties.
Okay, so for people who aren't aware, the government party in power at the moment in Hungary is Fidesz, if I've pronounced that properly, which is the government, which is the party of Viktor Orban, the current prime minister and long-time prime minister of Hungary.
Yes, for 12 years. Also, there is a smaller party involved. That's why I use plural. So there's the something like Democratic Christian, whatever. It's um, yeah. So that's that.
If I'm looking at my apologies, if I'm kind of defaulting to um,
Yeah, don't.
Wikipedia.
We do as well. I just wanted to mention it that
Okay.
it's there. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, so this is the Wikipedia page for that particular party, which is in an electoral alliance of sort with Fidesz and helps make up the government.
Yep.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, there was also a referendum in Hungary today.
Yes, we had a law that forbids um, to show explicit sexual content to children, basically, and there was a this is an anti-LGBT etc. Law, and there was a big fuss about it, and we had a sort of strengthening referendum about it.
Okay, so basically the law was to stop sort of in the West we have sort of this transgender gender ideology that penetrates apparently every facet of our society and very perniciously. I mean, I am not being objective on this. I have a very strong view on this. I think it's quite abhorrent what we do to the kids in our education system. But in the West, for any listeners in the West, I'm sure I don't need to sort of outline what happens in schools with the LGBT indoctrination that goes down into primary education, transgender ideology that's pushed on kids and stuff like this. So, if I'm not mistaken, this referendum in Hungary is basically to say no, should this be allowed or should it not be allowed?
You are correct.
Okay.
It's aiming for that. I mean, most of the population is not well versed in these stuff, so it's sort of like going forward and trying to um, prevent this stuff ever
Yeah.
happening or starting to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure people could sort of guess my view on this, what I would, how I would have voted in this referendum had I had the chance. But yeah, I think very good for Hungary if it does reject this kind of stuff. Um, on that point, I will bring in Milo. So Milo, if you want to jump in and give us a quick outline of yourself.
Well, I live in Serbia. I lived here all my life, and uh, in Serbia we had general elections and presidential elections. And in presidential elections, I voted for the opposition candidate, and in general elections, I voted for a small political party. It's called Sovereignist, which
Okay.
is basically an anti-globalist party. But
Okay.
I, it's a very small party, so it's kind of insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, not a problem. So, if you feel comfortable, why did you vote the way you did? If you don't mind telling us, or if you don't, that's okay.
Well, as far as presidential elections are concerned, I would say that the opposition candidate um, has good chances to get into the second round of the elections.
Is it
And
this guy that I'm currently showing on screen now? With this, is this the opposition candidate you're talking about?
uh, his name is last name Ponoš, so you can look him up
Okay,
that way.
you sure if he's listed? Do forgive me. I being a native English speaker, I fumble
Uh,
whenever it comes to other people's languages and pronunciation.
uh, Ponos,
NOS,
Serbia.
not Bono. It's not quite BONOS.
Serbia. Election president, you can type that so you can look him up.
That's not a problem. No, it doesn't seem to be showing up for me at the moment, I'm afraid. Okay, but I guess in general, sort of, so you voted for them because they're more anti-globalist. Is that sort of like you want I know we had a very brief discussion earlier today to sort of outline this kind of stuff, but um, so do you sort of think that Serbia should remain its own independent nation, or should it be aligned to maybe one way or the other, or what is your sort of conception of specifically why you voted and why you would be anti-globalist as such?
Well, the situation with Serbia is very complicated, as probably everyone knows. So I would say that the situation changed dramatically ever since the war in Ukraine started.
Okay.
Uh, because European Union uses carrot and stick against Serbia. It depends on the situation, and I would say that European Union is now using stick as a sort of punishment for not sanctioning Russia.
Okay. So do you think in many, just sort of on your take, do you think that could have strengthened the government vote? Is that Serbs might be rejecting this outside pressure and might have rallied around the incumbent party and the incumbent president, or
Well, both presidents and pretty much all political parties are against sanctions, but it might not turn out that way after the elections because nobody knows what's agreed between the European Union and each party and each politician. And there are suspicions that ruling party might impose some sanctions after the elections, but
Okay.
nobody knows as far as that is concerned.
Because that would be, well, in some ways, I guess that would be a bit surprising because forgive me, I'll not attempt to pronounce your president's name because I'll probably butcher it. But although he hasn't explicitly come out to endorse Russia, his allowance of these pro-Russian rallies in Belgrade has sort of put the perception, at least in Western media, that I have seen that Serbia is sort of like this Russian lackey or kind of puppet state, which obviously I personally don't agree with, but certainly that the government in Belgrade might lean closer to Moscow than it would to Brussels or Kiev.
Well, those rallies are organized by the far right wing parties and organizations, so they mostly do not represent the general sentiment in Serbia.
Okay, so the pro-Russian sentiment that certain people and certain groups have made a lot of, that's more of a fringe view. It's not an actual commonly held view amongst Serbs.
Yeah, most Serbs want a good relationship with both Ukraine and Russia, and uh, Serbia actually condemned Russia in United Nations General Assembly on two occasions.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess just finally before I go back to Peter for a second, how I'm just sort of I've got the basic opinion polls showing up at the moment, and it shows that essentially the current president and the current government in parliament are predicted to win quite handedly. I mean, do you sort of think that is the way it's going to turn out?
Uh, I can't see almost anything on the screen because I'm
Oh,
on my phone.
okay. Oh, sorry. That's right. You're on your phone. Yeah. So I'm just it's just on my screen. I'm just showing it for the eventual video. I've just got some opinion polling for the elections on the screen, and it just shows so the incumbent government, the SNS, is it's basically in the high 60s in the parliamentary and I think the presidential polling. So I'm assuming that kind of shows that the incumbent government and president will be quite easily re-elected. I mean, do you expect that to pan out?
Uh, I think that's overestimation for presidential elections.
Okay,
I think that it could be around 50 or below 50 for the current president, and for the general elections, we'll have to see,
okay,
because the problem with Serbian elections is there is a lot of rigging, so it's completely unpredictable what might happen like in the last moments of the voting.
okay. So it not as clear cut as it appears.
No, and we'll most likely won't know the final results in probably several weeks because there are lawsuits against polling stations, because if someone raises an objection, the court has to decide on every single instance.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that happens in Serbian elections. So essentially, this election could go on for weeks potentially.
Yes, and maybe for a month, who knows?
Okay, right. Well, I guess Peter, I'll bring you in. So just quickly, I'm just looking at the basic polling for Hungary. Let's just have a look. What exactly am I looking at here? So think this is two-party preferred. Um, yeah, just looking at it, it appears that Fidesz is sort of skyrocketed in support in the last couple weeks of this election. In
Yeah.
two-party preferred, it's a bit more of a tight race. It's not exactly a complete slam dunk whenever you. Because for people who aren't aware, and maybe if you could correct me if I've got this wrong, Peter, but in Hungary, because of the dominance of Fidesz, essentially every single other opposition party, apart from a joke party and a quote unquote far right party, every other party in Hungary has joined a coalition to try and unseat Viktor Orban and
Yeah,
Fidesz.
that's the basic.
Yeah.
That's the basic. Well, in addition, we have another, well, two parties. There's a so-called cash grab party, uh, which is basically there for the money, because if you as a party earn 1% of the vote, you don't have to. So you basically get money for campaigning, and if you achieve 1%, you don't have to give it back. And also, it's a quite good media stunt, because the guy who's running that party um, is
Is
well,
this the
basically
one that broke
this.
away from Jobbik by any chance?
No.
Or is
That's
it the joke
that's
party?
not even on these stuff. It's called NAPE, or something like NEP, uh, um, for the normal stuff. I can't really translate what it means. Um, so they are just here for the money, and uh, the guy who runs the thing is basically a not yet declared criminal. Uh, so that's that. In addition, and there's one more who is uh, basically, if you if you know Live Jasmine, he's the guy behind it, the money man, and he's basically just advertising himself and what his money is made of. So
Okay.
that's the two additional stuff which is not here. The rest is pretty much sound. So yeah, yes, the Mi Hazánk, or our our home,
What is
basically. That's
this?
the yeah, or our homeland movement. Yeah, that's the breakaway stuff from Jobbik, um, and they are basically went to the nationalistic way, and Jobbik joined up with the uh, other leftist parties, basically.
Yeah, so for
They
people,
have
oh,
a
oh, go on. Sorry to interrupt.
they have such a Nazi problem that Ukraine, as we know it, don't.
Uh,
So, yeah, every day there's another guy who turns out to be a hardcore Nazi.
uh,
so so
I
yeah, they are bunched up with the left. So
okay. Yeah, it's just
quite
I
funny.
know probably my followers would probably be familiar with Jobbik because a few years ago Jobbik used to be considered quite a far right party, but then it drastically changed itself and moved close to the center, and now it's joined up with the anti Orban coalition. And this again, I won't attempt to pronounce it because for people who aren't aware, me and Peter, we actually met up in person a couple years ago in Hungary. And I'm sure Peter can attest my attempts at trying to pronounce Hungarian was probably absolutely horrific at that time.
Ah, it wasn't that bad.
I'm afraid Your language is beautiful but utterly incomprehensible to me. That's all I can remember. But this party is sort of like the right wing rump of the Ubik movement that sort of lingers on as Ubik moved closer to the center. So I mean, just looking at this two polling, it sort of it's a lot closer than it appears in Serbia, but it looks like Fidesz will most likely win than not, but it's not by all means a clear shot.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of people think that we need some changes, but so the um, that turn in the so December and stuff. I mean the upper one
Oh, sorry.
poll. Uh, when they went down and the opposition went up, that's right before the war. And
Okay.
when the war started, the opposition, well, the opposition here is always going to negate what's the government wants to do. And since Orban said we don't want to be engaged in this war in any way other than caritative stuff and helping the refugees, uh, then the opposition went full Zelensky. So we want to send. They said we want to send ammo, weapons, even soldiers. So they went full on, and that's why it changed back again to the
Yeah.
original state of affairs.
So
But I
like,
don't know
oh,
if I can believe this because there are a lot of entrenched hate on on the opposition side. So
yeah. Well, I mean, like I say, I don't tend to trust opinion polls, but I'm not an expert at Hungarian or Serbian politics, so this is just kind of a very basic barometer for people to sort of follow. But I guess that kind of neatly leads on to just how how is the war affecting Hungary, because you Hungary actually shares a common border with Ukraine, and there is a part of Ukraine that actually has an ethnic Hungarian population within it, Transcarpathia.
yep. Uh, well, um, it's well not really affecting the country, only the um, well um, how should I put it? Um,
Sort of the
we
refugees, or
Yes, there are some refugees. Maybe we are looking for up to 1 million people uh, until the end. Like less, or that's the guesses I've heard.
yeah.
I think we have 600,000 at this point in time. I'm not really sure. That's the last one I've heard, and the other one is the prediction I've heard. So um, other than that, it's just basically the opposition and the government um, saying things at each other. We didn't really have an impact other than that. A bit of well, we fear from somebody getting trigger happy and stuff, but not really. We are at I think we're safe right now, but you know,
Okay. Just interestingly, because earlier in the war, I do know that there was a Ukrainian drone, an old Soviet era drone that Ukraine seemed to have fired that appeared to have crossed right across Romanian, Hungarian, and then Croatian airspace, and it landed in
yes,
Zagreb. So I don't know, was that reported in Hungary at all, or
yes, we know about that one, but since the issue here is we have a town and or a village in every 5 kilometers. So uh, such a drone. So if you shut down a drone like that, it will kill somebody
Yeah.
eventually. So I think since the NATO is um, telling us what to do with our airspace, basically. So the NATO commands the Hungarian military aircrafts.
Yeah.
Uh, our German general said, "Don't touch it because uh, it's just a surveillance drone. So no weapon systems, nothing, and it's ancient.
Yeah.
So we let it through because if we shut it down, that could have been a casus belli on any side. So we didn't touch it, but the Croatians are commanded from Spain, I believe, and the two centers didn't talk. So the Croatians were all over the place. That nobody told them that there's a drone situation, and they started talking shit immediately when it's landed. Basically, it reached its fuel reserves, and it was just landed as it. So
Yeah.
nobody shut down that drone. That's just fall down.
It landed in Zagreb, if I remember correctly. Student
Yeah,
accommodation, I think, or somewhere near the university.
yeah. It's a
So
miracle that nobody got injured, by the way.
yeah.
So
So just and then I'll bring on Milo to follow up on this question as well. But I guess if you speak to I don't want to sort of imply like you don't go out or anything, but if you do happen to speak to your neighbors or say you speak to your family or stuff like that, I mean, what would you say the general impression of Hungarians are towards say the war, Ukraine, Russia? Are they would they sort of side with one side against the other, or would they just sort of think it's better we just stay clear of it?
uh, well, most of the people want to stay clear of it either way. Um, I think those who are mainly on the right and supporting the government party, those people, including me, um, are on the side that we should. It's not our war, but on the opposition side, I've heard that we should support Ukraine, like the international left is
Yeah. But just
saying,
quickly
basically.
on that point, I mean, because I mean, maybe again you could correct me on this wrong, but I do believe that Hungary and Poland tend to be quite close as nations, but yet the
Yep.
Polish government and the Polish president has been quite verbose. That's probably they've been quite vocal against Hungary trying to stay neutral through all this, which is
Oh,
interesting. I'm just curious what you might think of that.
well, Poles are good people, but when they saw Russians or Germans, they go nuts.
Yeah,
So they are firmly on the Ukrainian side, and I understand it, but I would not recommend it. You see, when they vocally started to transfer weapons, I believe, and there was some talks about transporting aircraft and stuff. Uh, then near the Polish border, the Germans bombed
oh,
around.
the Russians.
Russians,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, because
So
just it.
we
Oh,
don't want that to happen to our minorities.
yeah, because as I said earlier on, there is actually a Hungarian minority it exists in Ukraine around the sort of Transcarpathian area. But just so people in chat have an idea of sort of what we're talking about in the demographics of this area. So a large part of what is now Western Ukraine used to be part of Poland, but through the Second World War, and it's interesting to sort of see this weird diplomatic dance between some very nationalistic Ukrainians and some very anti-Russian Poles. But in this part of Western Ukraine that used to be part of Poland, during the Second World War, there was, I don't know what else to call it other than an ethnic cleansing or maybe even a genocide of the local Polish population by some Ukrainian nationalists. And this is where you sort of this feeds into the whole idea of Stepan Bandera and the Ukrainians are Nazis and stuff like this. This genocide or ethnic cleansing of the Polish population was done with the sort of tacit permission of the Germans. And then whenever the Germans were pushed out of this area, the Soviets and Stalin deported the what remained of the Polish population back into the modern day borders of Poland. So this is why there isn't really much of an ethnic Polish population in Ukraine anymore. But also as part of the way Stalin rearranged the borders, he took a part of what was then Hungary, well, I guess it was Slovakia, a bit of Romania, but it's majority Hungarian population. He arbitrarily made that part of Ukraine. There was a part of Romania he made part of Ukraine. So this is why there are ethnic Hungarians, Romanians, even Bulgarians part of Ukraine. But yet, despite being a large part of what used to be Poland, there's very little to no Polish population in Ukraine. So there's this weird diplomatic dance between Ukrainian nationalists who idolize some of the people who engaged in this ethnic cleansing of the Poles during the Second World War, going on Polish TV with the portraits of these people in the background who engaged in this stuff, asking the Poles to support them. And by and large, from what I've seen, is a lot of the Poles are just willing to sort of like, okay, the bigger enemy is Russia. We'll kind of just overlook this kind of weird slight against Poles in our history. But it is a sort of a weird little thing that's going on here. So, um,
Well, or it's 4D chess,
well,
and
yeah,
they are they are supporting the war itself. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
cannot know.
which is also leads to another strange thing because the Poles, obviously, all of Eastern Europe came under Soviet domination after the Second World War, but there wasn't Hungary. In 1956, actually had the Hungarian Revolution and uprising, which was quite brutally suppressed by the Soviet Union. Poland, yeah, there were Soviet troops that kind of went in and quashed some of the protests, but it didn't have that specific experience. So it's just a bit interesting to sort of see how the Poles have sort of emerged as the leading anti-Russian faction within the European Union, but yet the Hungarians, who actually, if you take the idea that the Russia is the inheritor of the legacy of the Soviet Union, the Hungarians, who actually suffered quite brutally a Soviet invasion of their country, are looking for neutrality and stay out of the whole affair. That's an interesting historical quirk.
Yeah, but you see, in most of the tanks which came to Budapest, uh, uh, so the tanks are driven by ethnic Ukrainians. So
Oh, okay.
I
I wasn't
mean,
aware of
they
that.
they were part of the whole thing. So uh, I think there was a Monty Python guy who tweeted some dumb shit that please um, use your polls to vote if Ukrainians or the Russians came to suppress 56,
Yeah.
and there were like or 800 people telling him that uh, it's both
Yeah.
actually. So yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
But
but even that, why would we um, um, why should we hate those people who were commanded to come here? So they wouldn't been shot if they wouldn't drive their tanks and stuff here. So and otherwise the most of the cleansing and killing people was done by Hungarian communists. So we hate mostly communists. We um, um,
Based.
well, suspicious of Russians mostly, but uh, we lived together for 40 years,
Yeah.
and so it's not like hatred that the well the our left is talking about we should hate the Russians and stuff, but uh, most of the people is not about hate here.
Yeah. So I'll just move to Milo because I'm conscious that he hasn't spoken for a bit. But just I it's a complete anecdote on my part. But whenever I had the opportunity to go to Budapest, I was struck whenever I landed at the airport that most of the people in the airport, most of the airplanes actually in the airport were actually Aeroflot, and the vast majority of the passengers in the security and the passing through customs were Russians. So there does seem to be quite a lot of Russians, at least up until the pandemic kind of destroyed the world. That Hungary seemed to be a very popular destination for Russians to go on holiday. On that note, I'll bring in Milo. Milo, if you're still with us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sorry that I've sort of droned on a bit there and left you in the lurch, but um, what just kind of the same question to you. What would you say that sort of Serbs that you happen to know, or just in general, what would you perceive that Serbs are making of war and in general sort of relations with Russia and potentially any outside influence from Western countries trying to force Serbia to take a strong line one way or the other?
Well, most Serbs want to remain neutral as far as this war's concerned because I think that a lot of Serbs from our history understand that all wars are bad and
Yeah.
that uh, most of the suffering or all of the suffering is common people, and politicians use wars as their advantage. And as far as uh, as far as politicians are concerned, mm, they all claim that they are against imposing any kind of sanction, but I guess only time will tell how long will things remain that way because there are a lot of pressures from the European Union. For example, our oil company is owned by Gazprom, like majority of shares,
So for people who aren't
and
aware, Gazprom is one of the big major Russian oil companies. So if it owns this Serbian company, it's this Serbian oil is going to be subject to same sanctions that have hit Russian companies.
so nothing will change until the middle of May, and I think from 15th of May, all oil coming from the European Union will stop. So
Okay.
uh, uh, our government is trying to figure out what to do because Russians refuse to sell their shares of the company. I mean, the government could buy those shares, and Gazprom will lose the majority of shares of the company. So it will be de facto owned by the Serbian government. So sanctions would not apply anymore.
Oh,
But
go on.
but that's not an option as far as Gazprom is concerned. They want to remain the majority owners of the company. So I mean, Serbian government could nationalize it, but that would ruin the relations with Russia.
Yeah. So, what's happening to sort of fuel and petrol and energy prices in Serbia? Are they skyrocketing or?
Uh, Serbian government temporarily reduced taxes, so Serbian fuel is one of the cheapest in the region. But
Wow.
that's until the 11th of April, I think. And after that, who knows? It will most likely skyrocket. But much bigger concern is how will we get oil if
Yeah.
the EU shuts down supply. So they're thinking about alternatives that tankers from United Arab Emirates could move to Albania and then move on the road fuel trucks from Albania to Serbia, but that will drastically increase the price of oil.
Yeah.
So there's no good choice. So we can either nationalize the oil company and avoid sanctions or suffer higher prices. And another concern is how will we get the natural gas? Uh, there is a pipeline from Russia, Turkey, Bulgaria, and it gets to Serbia. But I think that Bulgarian government announced that they will end all contracts with Gazprom in by the end of 2022.
So
So
it's so just for people who aren't aware, Serbia is effectively a part. Yeah, it is surrounded by European Union members, apart from Bosnia and Albania, and depending on your views, Kosovo as well. But essentially, Serbia is surrounded by countries that have put on sanctions to Russia. So even if Serbia didn't sanction Russia in any way, shape, or form, it's just not physically feasible for Russian oil or Russian gas to get to Serbia. It's kind of a victim of Western sanctions, come hell or high water, whatever Serbia decides to do.
yeah, I agree. That's the situation. So um, maybe in these situations, our biggest curse is not sharing border with Russia, and some view it as a blessing, but right now I think it's a curse.
Uh, I can imagine many countries, Hungary included to a certain degree, if you aren't hacking the Western line, the approved Western line on Russia, you find yourself very isolated. If you're a country like Hungary or Serbia, be so are Serbs sort of conscious of this? Are they aware that they're kind of living before the real economic hit starts to come?
Well, I think that majority is not aware because there is a lot of censorship. All televisions, newspapers are controlled by the government, and they can write whatever they want, and people will believe it. So I think that most people are not aware of that there is energy crisis coming and very very soon. So I mean, it's impossible to prepare for something like that.
Unless you're going to go down to the petrol station and start filling up barrels and hiding them in the house. But yeah, fortunately, this isn't just a Serbian problem. All of us who live in Europe are probably going to be faced with escalating costs in energy and everything, potentially years to come. So uh, potentially it might hit the Serbs a bit more because of the way it's situated politically and diplomatically.
Yes, and I mean another problem is also electricity because we have a government-owned e- electric company, and there are this winter there were huge issues with the quality of coal that is being burned in those.
Yeah.
uh, how do you call them? Uh,
Power station.
yeah, coal fired.
Yeah, coal power. Yeah. Okay.
And we had to import a lot of electricity from mostly Bulgaria. And everyone wonders what's going to happen like next winter if the quality of coal remains poor, and we want to import electricity from neighboring countries, and what will happen if they don't have any extra electricity to export to us,
Yeah.
especially Bulgaria, if they want to end all contracts with Gazprom, they will also suffer electricity shortages. So
And
we might,
Serbia will be knocked on by that.
yeah, we might end up with a complete breakdown, like we did in during the sanctions from '92 to '95. Uh, Serbia was under oil embargo for more than 3 years, or less than 2 years. I'm not sure, but basically all oil had to be smuggled from Romania and Bulgaria, and those were difficult times. So most people remember those, and GDP of Serbia fell by 50% within 1 year after the sanctions were imposed.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of leads on to the other question, the burning question that I sort of have. Are you aware of how the war is sort of the war in Ukraine is affecting Serbs in Bosnia, in potentially Kosovo? Is it creating more tension there? If you're aware of that, or because one of the things, maybe you could correct me on this, is I'm aware that the sort of the Serb Republic in Bosnia, its leader has been talking for a number of years and is sort of escalated his rhetoric recently that he might be looking to succeed from Bosnia. And I'm just interested if you might have any idea or insight on that, and if war in Ukraine could mean potential, I wouldn't say war in Bosnia or in the Balkans, but an increase in tensions in that region.
Well, I think that any kind of separation from Serb Republic in Bosnia is unfeasible and unrealistic, uh, because in 1992 they only managed to separate temporarily through the war, and they managed to do that because Serbia was actively supporting Serb rebels or Serb separatists, and they don't have any allies if they want to separate from Bosnia right now. I mean, they need, obviously they need fuel, they need weapons, and all of that was supplied by Serbia back then. And right now the situation is drastically different, and
Yeah,
there is also NATO presence in Bosnia. So I don't know, the Serb leaders in Bosnia, maybe they're bluffing, maybe they're not, maybe they're anticipating dissolution of NATO, and
yeah.
if NATO would dissolve, I think it would ignite all imaginable conflicts in the Balkans.
Uh, just I know you're on your phone, but just for people who are watching on the stream and for the video I've just brought up again, this is a place where Wikipedia sort of does help with this, but this is an outline of this Serb Republic in Bosnia. So for people who aren't aware, modern day Bosnia Herzegovina is sort of this bizarre NATO protectorate that is kind of only held together to a large degree through essentially, yeah, the Dayton Accords and NATO military force. So, for people who are looking at this on the stream, um, this is an ethnic map of Bosnia, and as you can see, the green areas are Bosniaks. They tend to be Muslim. So, if I was to bring up just bring up this sort of general map of Bosnia, say if this Serb republic was to in some way succeed from Bosnia, unless it joins with Serbia, it is hard to see how it is a viable state. And effectively, if it did succeed, it's hard to see how the rump, the remainder of Bosnia itself, could in any way, shape, or form be a viable political entity going forward. So that's kind of the interesting dynamic there. So
Mm. I don't think that it's feasible to peacefully dissolve Bosnia. So it would have to go to war once again,
yeah,
and no one in Croatia or Serbia wants that, because in 19th both Croatia and Serbia supported the war,
yeah. So
and
if they tried to succeed, they would be fighting on their own. They couldn't expect help from the Serbs, Serbia.
yes, and NATO would get involved because they're effectively peacekeepers there.
Yeah,
So I don't think that under current circumstances war is possible. Well, if only if NATO would dissolve, it
yeah.
would be possible. But there would be no winners in that war. I think that we would see genocide.
Yeah, essentially the darkest days of the breakdown of Yugoslavia. Then,
Yeah, and on the other hand, there's Kosovo, and that's, I would say, maybe even more complicated than Bosnia in the current situation.
okay, okay. So, I apologize. I had to let the noisy dog out back. But so I guess coming back to you, Peter. How what is sort of your perception of you were mentioning earlier on someone from Monty Python made a comment about how Hungarians should vote. It's not going to be Michael Palin, is it? Have a quick look.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, but
Um,
just on that wider point, not specifically just him, but I have noticed this
John Cleese.
trend. John Cleese.
Yeah, of all people. Yeah,
Great.
I was.
Let's
Yeah,
have a look.
check it out. It's on his Twitter. In fact, I also tweeted back to him.
If I can just find the specific tweet to come up for, but not specifically just going into John Cleese, but I have noticed this trend for a number of years where yeah, here it is here. Oh. Question for Hungarian voters. The brutal invasion of Hungary in 1956 was carried out by A. the Ukrainians, B. the Russians. Answers on your voting card, please. I mean that's a bit of an idiotic statement because, as you said, is it was the Soviet Union, and because Hungary borders Ukraine, which was then a Soviet republic, kind of by definition, most of the Soviet soldiers who would have manned the invasion force of the Hungarian Revolution would have been Ukrainians, ironically.
Yeah, indeed.
So I guess that's sort of your apologize. This dog is getting a bit angsty. I'll go and deal with him in a second. But yeah, so this is just kind of the typical detached Western elite liberal sort of Twitter personality lecturing other people on their history when they don't really have any understanding of it themselves. But I'm just on a wider point because I have noticed this trend for a number of years actually, where it tends to be very left wing people in the West. And John Cleese is a good example of it just now. But if anyone in Britain will remember Time Team, Tony Robinson, he did a very scurrilous. It was some kind of documentary where he went to Budapest, and anyone who's never been to Budapest or seen photos of Budapest, the absolute Apologies, the dog. Come on, sit, sit, sit. Good boy. Sorry, I'm afraid the dog is trying to join the stream with me. But um, Tony Robinson, he went. Yeah. So anyone who's not aware of Budapest or has been, they will, or if you have been, you will know that essentially the most beautiful building, the jewel of that city, is the Hungarian Parliament, and I've had the honor of seeing it myself. It is an astounding sight, and he gave a monologue in front of. I'll have to try and look it up and see if I can play it for you guys. But he was walking along the Danube with the parliament in the background, talking about the great history of Hungary, like how Hungary is now occupied by a fascist thug. And I just thought, good God. And not only that, Jean Claude Juncker, who used to be the European Commission president, he once famously got very drunk and called Viktor Orban the dictator. And a lot of George Soros being certainly one of the big names. He tried to push certain policies through the Open Societies Foundation in Hungary. Again, I hate to go back to a specific anecdote, but granted, I was very briefly in Budapest, but the only time, and this is a large metropolitan city. Peter could probably correct me if there's other places like this, but during my time there, the only time I ever seen a rainbow flag was flying off that man's university in that city. I seen it nowhere else in the city. So I guess my point to you, Peter, is it seems that there are a lot of predominantly left wing people in Western countries, be they in government, be they celebrities, who seem to take on the mantle to lecture Hungarians about how they should do democracy and about how they should run their affairs. And then obviously, this has come even more to light as we were talking about Milo in regards to Serbia, but in terms of Hungary, how we mentioned earlier on, the Polish president was I wouldn't say condemning, but he was certainly calling out Hungary, and there are other countries that are calling out Viktor Orban and Hungary about not towing the line in regards to Russia, in regards to getting involved in the war to this the extent that other places have. I mean, how would you say that Hungarians would sort of take this foreign interference, for lack of a better term, in sovereign affairs of Hungarians and their own democracy?
Oh well, it's hmm. um, there are two takes. Usually, one is siding with the Westerners or mm, or their media, let's say, uh, and because you see, there's a notion here that we are such a backwards country and we are not westernized enough. So we must take everything uh, face value from the West and implement it here.
So that means
Um,
more pride rallies, Black
yeah,
Lives Matter rallies in Budapest, because we all know that the large the black Hungarian population is being so horrifically oppressed.
yeah,
And also Hungary needs refugees from the Middle East. Apparently, you guys need lots of
definitely.
those.
Definitely, we
Yeah.
need more people because we can't reproduce enough. So somebody have to pay the pensions later. So yeah, there's also that's here. But thankfully, it's a vocal minority. The majority either don't care, basically, or or they believe to Orban that we are not a backwards country, in
Yeah.
fact, and we can decide for ourselves what to do.
Okay. So I don't know if this might be a bit of a leading question, but I'm assuming most of chat has sort of figured out where I stand politically. But um, would you say that Hungary, where it is now, is part of the European Union and is part of NATO, is it a sovereign, independent state, or not? Or do you think that Viktor Orban has been able to preserve Hungarian independence to a large degree that certain other countries in the European Union might not have, or
We are trying to be as independent as we can, but yeah, we are a less than 10 million country, so uh, we can't do much against the Fourth Reich, let's say, um, and so. So yeah, we are acting as independent as we can, but yeah, some compromises have to be done. Uh, for example, we were condemned about the second nuclear power plant, which we bought from the Russians, which is in jeopardy at this point in time.
yeah,
Um, Also, we were condemned about the um, there will be a train line, or there is a train line, but it's going to be upgraded. uh, it runs through Serbia to the sea, basically to offload Chinese cargo and coming to Europe this way instead of from the north. And we were condemned about that, interestingly, and a lot of things. But we do that anyway if we can.
okay. So
So
at least under Viktor Orban, is Hungary tries to maintain essentially its own independent foreign policy, and whereas, granted, again, I'm not an expert at Hungarian politics, but I was looking at. Have a look. Is this the guy who is? I think. Correct me, Peter. This is the
yes,
guy who's running for the uh, basically to replace Viktor Orban.
yes. Well, he's the figurehead.
Yeah, and
It's an interesting situation because he doesn't really have a party behind him, so um, he will be a single guy
yeah,
against. So not really against. So so let's say they won the election, and there are six parties and him.
yeah,
So, uh, yeah, probably he will be the prime minister, and he will, or he can choose who's gonna be on what position in his government. But even the leading opposition party, the DK, which is an offshoot of the uh, MSP, which was the uh, original communist party back behind the Iron Curtain. So they
mm,
so the party leader said that after the elections we can talk about who's gonna be the prime minister. So I don't know if he will replace Viktor Orban. Basically, he's just there to convince mildly right winger voters uh, mm, to change sides.
yeah. So just again, I'm conscious, chat. Believe me, if I had a better source I could immediately default to, I would. But just for the sake of argument, just looking at this guy on Wikipedia, let's just have a quick look. Uh, how would I pronounce that? Marquise?
Márki-Zay.
Marquise supports increased European integration, including the introduction of the euro currency. For people who aren't aware, Hungary maintains its own currency called the florint, and the coins are very beautiful. I quite like the coins. Um, but he wants to scrap that and join the euro because that's totally never backfired on countries that have joined the euro. Joining the European Public Prosecutor's Office, as well as favor of Hungary remaining in NATO. He has stated that if elected in April, he will introduce a new constitution to restore the rule of law and to introduce same sex marriage. On societal issues, he attacks Viktor Orban for his measures, which he considers to be liberticidal. Not too sure what's is that like killing a liberal, libercidal. Not too sure specifically what that term is there, but um, labeling some of his government's actions both xenophobic and homophobic, like the 2022 LGBTQ in education referendum, and is being described as supporting LGBT rights. He accused the Prime Minister of organizing immigration of, and that it was in Fidesz, the ruling party, that we find the most gay people, suggesting that Orban's son shared his sexual orientation. Okay. Accused of representing a coalition with left wing personalities, he said that Jesus Christ was a left wing person. Perceived as a neoliberal on this guy is like literally the
Yeah,
the
it's a
this is
mess.
this is the stereotypical Western politician, has right wing, quote unquote, right wing economic views. The market rules all, but left wing socially. But also, I'm it again. This is Wikipedia, so take it for what it's worth. But this here, he accused the prime minister of organizing. Said that we find the most gay people within Fidesz. He so just to parse that out, what does he mean by that? Well, I don't live in Hungary, so I'm sure it's different. But this idea, okay, why are right wing parties tend to be homophobic or anti LGBT? I would say that there is a difference between being gay, being LGBT, because well, I have to be conscious that I am going to upload this onto YouTube, so what I can say and what I can't say. But I know through my time in politics, I know that I've met a lot of gay people in right wing politics, and they're gay, but they're not. I can't use the term that I want to use, and I'm sure chat is probably screaming at me at the moment. But they're not they're not LGBT. They're not the LGBT agenda. They're a guy who's just, or they're a woman who has their sexual orientation, but that their sexual orientation isn't their identity. It isn't their politics. They're just. I know some people in chat might not like this term, but they're essentially a normal person. They just have a different sexual attraction. So this guy is going down this sort of Western meme that if you are anti-LGBT, must hate gay people, and therefore like this sort of scurrilous thing. We find most gay people in Fidesz. Yeah, that could be true, but because there are gay people in Fidesz, doesn't mean that they have to be in favor of essentially like what fetish pride parades in Budapest. They
Indeed.
don't have to be in favor of transgender story time in primary schools, which is for some reason this is sort of the conception that Western politics has decided is the big issue of the day, is that oh, you're anti-gay, so therefore you're anti-sexualizing children. Like no, I don't understand why that is the dichotomy in Western countries, that we have that dichotomy in politics. But as you can see here, this is a Hungarian guy who seems to be a carbon copy of a Western politician who's now trying to bring these ideas into Hungary. And I mean, obviously, you've voted the way you have, Peter, and I personally think that would probably be the way that I would vote if I was Hungarian myself. But yeah, as someone who lives in Britain, who sees and hears about the stuff that's taught in schools, have inadvertently stumbled into London pride. This is not the stuff. This is not a healthy society that it breeds, and Hungary would probably be better without it.
There's a explanation. If you, I think you should look up a bit, but I'm not sure where it's stated. But he's also Canadian.
Oh yeah, I did notice that.
Just saying.
Interestingly,
So
he is a dual
that's
national
why
of Canada.
he's that into this kind of politics.
So
But
this
it's
man
it's
is
actually
He is the Hungarian Justin Trudeau. Is that basically it?
Yeah, sort of. Um, so
Look
it's
at it, chat.
basically
The face
unheard of.
of
Yes,
progress.
is yeah. um, uh,
The face of progress. If you don't vote for this man, then you're a barbarian and want to hold Hungary back. This man will bring all the benefits that the West has to you and your kids.
yeah. So this kind of politics is unheard of here. So he said such outrageous things. I don't know who is still supporting him, who can think independently. I
Yeah.
mean, I understand some of the left wingers who want change because apparently Fidesz steals a lot and stuff. So I can live with that maybe they are corrupt and stuff. But voting for that guy is I don't know
Mm.
as
Yeah, I mean, I personally, this is kind of where I diverge from a lot of the people who are rather pro-Russian. Is I just can't get over the corruption that happens under Putin and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's one thing between being anti-corruption and sort of just incompetence in government, and there's, oh, I don't like that, so therefore I'm going to vote for a guy who wants to sexualize my kids primary school
yeah.
bit much. So um apologize if that was sort of a bit of a weird rant, but I'm kind of throwing red meat to chat. I know chat would have liked that. So just to, I guess I kind of addressed it with you, Milo, in terms of foreign influence and how it's impacting Serbia in ramifications for the Serbian economy. But um, again, as someone who is basically a novice to Serbian politics, I'm assuming this United Serbia group is kind of the main opposition group in Serbia. I just out of whenever we spoke earlier, you sort of described yourself as liberal, but with the caveat that it means something very different in Serbia. So I'm just curious as to what would be your view on this sort of like westernization of Serbian society and similar topics.
Well, I have to tell you that Serbian society is very divided.
Yeah,
I think that support for European Union membership, I think it's around 50. It goes up and down depending on the year and the current environment. And there is a division between the people who are more traditional and people who want, uh, let's say, Western values. And
yeah.
I think that Serbia doesn't have any kind of realistic chances to ever join the European Union, and it never had. And that's something that people in Serbia don't agree. That they usually think that if things moved faster between like 2000 2012,
So
that
just out of curiosity, because I know that Serbia would never join NATO for obvious reasons, but why do you think it would never join the European Union?
because of objections from the Netherlands and I would say a few more countries in the European Union, Croatia,
Would that
because
just
there are,
in Croatian terms, would that just be because of the animosity from the Yugoslav wars?
well, there are a lot of unresolved issues from that time. For example, border between Croatia and Serbia was never officially determined because both sides claim more territory, and de facto border between Serbia and Croatia is on the Danube River, but Croatians claim more land on the Serbian side of the river, and it was never resolved ever
Oh,
since the Yugoslavia broke apart. And other issues are with missing people from the war, because I think hundreds or thousands of Croatians went missing and were never found, and they're most likely in some mass graves somewhere either in Serbia or Croatia. And Serbia uh, has those secret documents that is unwilling to share with Croatia. So intelligence,
so essentially,
because
Croatia just off the bat is just the big red stop to Serbia ever joining the EU.
yes, and
Oh,
I mean those crimes were committed in 1991. So from that point, it became absolutely unrealistic because to join the EU, because a lot of people who committed those crimes are living in Serbia and are completely free. So they would have to go to prison if the Serbian government or Serbian intelligence agency would release those documents. So
oh. So I.
you would have
Oh, go on.
you would have to wait until everyone who was involved in that war to die, so intelligence agency could release those documents, and those graves could be dug out, and families in Croatia would know what happened to their family members.
So, just as a bit of a sidetrack, I'm assuming just off that bat, relations between Serbia and Croatia aren't especially close.
They were improving from 2000 to 2012 when Democratic Party was in power, and we had a more Western oriented president. But since 2012, relations deteriorated because Vucic, who is who was prime minister from 2014 to 2017, and current president, he was minister in the government of Slobodan Milosevic
Ah,
in the 90s, and he was supporting war in Croatia. So he was personally in those rebel held areas in Croatia and actively supporting him, together with Vojislav Šešelj, uh, who was he's still a very controversial person in in both Serbia and Croatia. So uh, I don't think that problems with Croatia will be resolved anytime soon. So that's one reason why Serbia was never going to become the member of the EU, and one reason is because the EU has nothing to gain from Serbia, mostly because of the geographical location, because it doesn't share border with Russia. I mean, it's completely surrounded by both the EU and NATO, so they can do whatever they want to, because Russia cannot have any kind of influence in this region. I mean, if Serbia shared border with Russia, things would be drastically different. And one thing that I would say that most people, even in the former Yugoslavia, don't know that in 1991 the European Union offered Yugoslavia to be a candidate for the membership of the EU. But at that point it was too late, because the Yugoslavia was already completely politically fractured,
yeah.
and if things were different, Yugoslavia as a state would most likely join the EU in 2004. But unfortunately, there was no
history.
way at that point to
So
keep the country together.
if you don't mind me asking, how old are you? If that's not too
Uh,
personal question.
uh, 28.
28. So yeah, you're basically the same age as me. So um, you would have, yeah, you would have been very young because my I'm from a British Army family, and I can distinctly remember it would have been, I think it would have been 1997, 1999. My father, part of the British Army, he was actually deployed to Kosovo, and I think earlier. I would have been too young to remember it, but I think he was actually deployed to Bosnia as well as part of the NATO mission there. Um, so that's kind of my experience is having my father who was deployed there. I'm just curious if it's not too personal a question for you. What is sort of your memories of that era? I mean, did you witness the NATO bombing of Belgrade and of your country and things like that?
Well, I remember 1999 when the bombing was happening, and me and my family moved to the countryside because we were living in the apartment building on the last floor, and that was the most dangerous spot to be in any kind of bombing.
Mm,
And we moved temporarily to the countryside, and people who lived in that building, most of the day they spent in the basement of the building. And I live far away from Belgrade, but a town close, around 30 kilometers from our town, was heavily damaged because the army was hiding tanks in that area. So it was detected by the NATO, and a lot of people died. But
sorry to hear that. I mean, I don't want
one
to.
thing,
Oh, go on.
one thing that I'll never forget are those air raid sirens, and there are like two versions of the sirens when danger is coming and when danger is leaving. And I distinctly remember those sounds. So I would hide under the bed when whenever I would hear those sounds. Although there was a small chance of bomb dropping in the countryside. In cities, it was the most dangerous.
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole war is so complicated that it is really. I think it would take days to cover the whole situation. But I would say that bombing was not unprovoked. So I know that a lot of people hate to hear that, but it is well documented that even in 1998, when the terrorism appeared in Kosovo, when Albanians started their rebellion, that around 200 uh, two 250000 people left Kosovo because the Serbian government and Serbian police was absolutely mishandling the whole situation. I
Okay.
mean, the, they would bring police and they would like burn villages and expel people because they didn't know where the terrorists were hiding, because Kosovo is mountainous terrain, and they were hiding in woods, in sheds, and who knows where. And
So the Serbian police and the army were just very competent, or just they
I would say
scorched
that
earth, for lack of a better term, is how they dealt with it.
yeah, I mean, they mostly didn't care about the Albanian casualties, and
Yeah.
there were many massacres, like revenge massacres, and they're very well documented. If Albanians would kill a few policemen, they would take 20 Albanians and murder them and bury their bodies. And
So, um, just so I can give a bit of context to people who are listening in chat who might not be aware, historically, if correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Kosovo is sort of considered like the national homeland of the Serbian nation. I believe there was a number of large battles that the Serbs fought against the Turks in that area, but in recent centuries and especially in recent decades, is the population is very much shifted towards a Albanian and a Muslim majority in Kosovo. So that is why there's such contention over that area. So if I've got that wrong, please do correct me.
you're absolutely correct. And Serbia regained control of Kosovo after the first Balkan War. That was at the beginning of 20th century, and it was almost mostly almost like 90 plus percent of the population was Albanian, and during the interwar period, there were so-called ethnic or population exchange. A lot of those Albanians were deported to Turkey because they were willing to accept them, because that region was ruled by Turkey, so they had a lot of connections back then with Turkey, and a lot of them voluntarily accepted to
Yeah,
be deported to Turkey, and then Serbs from other regions of Balkans would move to Kosovo, and that worked like that until the Second World War, and after Second World War, communists came to power and gave a lot of power to Albanians and expelled those Serbs who came to Kosovo before that and forbid their return. So, and after the war, Kosovo was heavily subsidized, and basically they lived off welfare. And
yeah,
they had plenty of kids, so they had their population was growing way faster than Serbian population, and they had large levels of autonomy, and that's something that Serbs didn't like, because Serbia was divided between two autonomous provinces, one on the north and one on the south, which is Kosovo. And I have to tell you that Serbs were oppressed under the Albanian rule in Kosovo, and even those who lived there even before Yugoslavia were leaving Kosovo because of the oppression from the Albanians, and
yeah.
not only Albanian authorities, but even ethnic Albanians would attack them and
Yeah, so I mean, it's a
harass them.
very complex situation, and I know my chat sort of gets a bit annoyed with me constantly trying to appeal for nuance, but yeah, this Kosovo as an independent state, without going into a whole spiel that I've given in pretty much every stream I've ever talked about it in, but it only exists essentially at the whim of NATO guns. And whenever you hear Western politicians talk about Kosovo, it's always as this sort of, and I guess to a degree in recent decades, it was a victim of Serb retaliation, I guess would be the correct term for it. But historically, you don't get this context that, yeah, why is Serbia so committed to Kosovo? Why does this hold such resonance with Serbs, and why they feel so strongly, or at least the Serbian government feels so strongly against Kosovar independence in the way it was conducted in 2008? Because for people who aren't aware, if you've missed my previous streams where I discussed it in terms of Crimea and the Donbass, is There was no referendum held in Kosovo. It is the Kosovars just unilaterally declared independence, and it was guaranteed at the point of NATO military action.
And one thing that it is important to mention is that in 1999, NATO organized a peace conference between Serbian government and representatives of Kosovo in France. It's in so-called Rambouillet Accords. It's Rambouillet Accords,
Yeah,
which was basically a peace agreement designed by NATO. And what NATO wanted to accomplish is to create another Bosnia from Serbia, or it was called Yugoslavia, like
yeah,
Rump Yugoslavia back then. And that agreement was unacceptable for Serbia because basically Kosovo would de facto become another Republika Srpska or Serb Republic. Like what is Serb Republic in Bosnia, Kosovo would become within Serbia, and all military would have to leave except 1,500 soldiers deployed around border area, and they would need to ask permission from NATO to move temporarily elsewhere. So KFOR or NATO-led peace mission would de facto be under the military of Kosovo.
yeah,
And one thing that was good about the Rambouillet was that Kosovo would not have ability to declare independence. It would have to remain within Serbia, but effectively it would be a state within state. And
yeah,
I mean, hindsight it's 2020, and for Serbia it would have been better if Milosevic signed that peace agreement. But I know that at that time it was completely unacceptable because he knows that he would lose power in
yeah,
Serbia. Basically, it would be perceived as complete surrender without the fight, and I think that majority of people would not accept any kind of NATO army within Serbia without a fight. So there had to be a fight, and Serbia de facto surrendered in, I think it's in June of 1999 when the Kumanovo Agreement was signed, and Serbia agreed to completely move all military and all police from Kosovo, and the resolution in the United Nations Security Council was adopted. It's resolution 1244, which I mean, if you read it closely, it guarantees that Kosovo remains part of Serbia, and after that, politicians and everyone else will seek solution, and whenever in the future solution is found, that resolution will be withdrawn and some other resolution will be adopted. But in the meantime, what happened? I think that Serbia was effectively tricked, like Gorbachev was tricked by NATO in 1991 or
bit of
1989.
a bit of a running theme here, isn't there?
Yes, so what happened is 2008 is that Kosovo declared independence, and even countries like United States, France, and United Kingdom who voted for the resolution 1244 in the Security Council, which guarantees that Kosovo remains in Serbia, they unilaterally recognized Kosovo independence in 2008, and Serbia felt like they were tricked because when they signed the peace agreement with the NATO in 1999, there was no talk about the Kosovo independence. So they claimed that it remains in Serbia, but outside of Serbian control, and at one point in future, like for example with Cyprus, I mean, a solution will be found, and Serbia will regain control. And even in the resolution 1244, uh, it says that Serbian military will be allowed to return to Kosovo. It says hundreds, not thousands. So less than 1,000 soldiers,
Yeah.
according to resolution, need to return, but it has to be approved by KFOR, and KFOR never approved redeployment. Basically, Serbian military, according to that resolution, is allowed to be present on around churches and monasteries and on the border. And when I say border, I mean border with Albania and
Yeah.
Macedonia and that. But KFOR never authorized. So Serbia was effectively tricked by NATO.
There's a
Whoa.
bit of a running theme there, isn't there, in history? And if I could just pick up on some points there, you mentioned how this the Yugoslav and I guess then the Serbian army would be allowed near churches and monasteries. Just to sort of link that back to another point that I was raising recently, because of some incidents in Armenia recently in increasing tensions with Azerbaijan. I just to sort of link why churches are a very specific, interesting point. So with this handy map, as I was saying, is that most Kosovo today is majority Albanian and Muslim, and anyone who sort of has an idea of what happened in Yugoslavia and especially within Bosnia Herzegovina, it was very much divided between Muslim Bosniaks, Catholic Croats, and Orthodox Christian Serbs. So places of worship, churches, mosques, monasteries were very much singled out to be targeted or as places of refuge. Um, Link this back to what has happened recently and is continuing to happen to this day in Armenia. Armenia is quite in many ways quite similar to what has happened in Serbia. So for people who aren't just again for people who are listening to my previous stream, and I'm sorry if this is a bit of a diversion, but just to sort of give people a bit of why events in Yugoslavia, in the former Yugoslavia and in Serbia, affect events in Ukraine, and also affect events in the Caucasus, which obviously then draw in the influence of Moscow and Russia, is Armenia is a very ancient nation. The Serbs, the Serbs came sort of historically round about the end of the Roman Empire. The Slavs sort of migrated into the Balkans. This is where the Poles, all the Slavic peoples of Europe, they sort of originated somewhere up here in this steppe. They migrated down here. So the Serbs, I believe, they settled and sort of came. The term is ethnogenesis, the sort of creation of a nation. I believe they sort of arose as a separate, distinct people around about the 600s AD. The Armenians, for people who aren't aware, are a very ancient people. They them and I believe the Georgians, and maybe some of like the Chechens and some of the Caucasus people. These are people who are essentially the indigenous people of the Caucasus. So like the Turks arrived in what is now Turkey and Anatolia around about 1000 AD, but the Armenians have been there essentially forever. They're the first Christian nation, the first nation to adopt Christianity, and all this territory used to be Armenian to such an extent there was an Armenian kingdom that stretched all the way around here. The Azeris are a Turkic people, so along with the Turks, they sort of originate up in this area, but with various historical migrations as they came to settle here and displaced a lot of the Armenian population in this area. So For people who aren't aware, there was a large war, the Karabakh War, that happened here in Christmas 2020, and uh, I'll see if I can bring up a video and link this back to why it is pertinent to what happens in Kosovo with the Serbs. So Azeri troops, Armenian gravestones, because there's like I say, the Armenians have been here for thousands of years, and a very ancient people, long the oldest church in Christianity. So there's a lot of ancient monasteries in this area and even in this area. And essentially this have a look at these modern graves. The Russians came in as a peacekeeping force to maintain order in this area after the Karabakh War. And some of the specific places where the Armenians said that the Russians had to protect were monasteries in this area, because this isn't specifically what I was looking for, but this sort of gives you an idea of what the Azeris are doing. So
Such nice jokes.
so this is them destroying a more modern grave. Let's see if they have any, but yeah, essentially there's a very ancient graves. The Armenians historically have a very ancient way of gravestones. It's like a stele, for people who know what steles are. And the Armenians have made a very specific, not the Armenians, the Azeris have made a very specific habit of destroying these. And like I say, these are hundreds of years old. They essentially, it's kind of like the historical destruction of the Armenian history in this area. So that's what, and of course, Azerbaijan is a Shiite Muslim country, destroying Christian monasteries and Christian graves. So to bring this back, and again, I apologize if this is a bit of a diversion, but yeah, to bring this back into Albania, Milo, if you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that that also happened in Kosovo, where Muslim ethnic Albanians would essentially destroy ancient Serbian monasteries and Christian burial grounds.
Yes, that happened in 2004. I think it's 2004. There was a pogrom of Serbs because there is I mean it's a very well known video where Albanian would climb on the roof of the church and knock down the cross, and everyone below there would cheer that action. And
Actually, I've
I
just
mean,
conveniently found a footage of what appears to be that. So, like I say, this is why, especially in the former Yugoslavia, but also there's a lot of history. So this is why whenever NATO sort of bumbled into its campaign in the former Yugoslavia and took on this radically anti-Serbian stance, or recently in the Karabakh War, why Washington seemed to just arbitrarily really support the Azeris. It just ignored why are these grievances? Why does Armenia and why do Serbia and Serbs feel so strongly about these issues? And it's I know most Western audiences would have this sort of more secular view on things, but you have to sort of understand is that these churches, these monasteries, and yes, even on the opposite side, whenever the Serbs or potentially the Armenians burned mosques and stuff, these are visceral symbols of the local cultural identity, the local history. So to destroy these things, sorry to interrupt Milo, but I just kind of want to give a bit more context on this of why they are so abhorred, it elicits such feelings in these countries.
yes, I can see that's exactly video. That is what I was talking about. But I mean, the thing is that mm, basically not all Albanians were against Serbs, and the problem is that Albanians who supported Serbs were either killed or expelled from Kosovo. So only the
Yeah.
most radical Albanians remained. Mm, Most pro-Serbian Albanians from Kosovo moved to Serbia in 1999 when the Serbian police left the area because they had no protection at that point. From 1999, no one had any protection in Kosovo. So either Serbs or Albanians who supported Serbia, they were regularly attacked. And after 1999, almost all Serbs left Kosovo. Only a few of them remained in the northern Kosovo, which is uh, close to central Serbia. But I mean, the problem is that issue with Kosovo intensified after 1989, called anti-bureaucratic revolution, where there was a Milosevic-led coup d'état in autonomous provinces of Vojvodina and in Kosovo, where in Kosovo Albanian leaders were replaced with Serbian leaders. And from that point, Albanians started to intensify their protests, which were peaceful until 1998 when the terrorism started. But there was no terrorism before that year. They were trying to uh, peacefully restore autonomy that Milosevic took away from them. And
Yeah.
that autonomy that Kosovo had was very unpopular among all Serbs because they perceived that it was unfair because one slogan of Yugoslavia was weak Serbia, strong Yugoslavia, and strong Serbia, weak Yugoslavia, or non existent Yugoslavia. Basically, as long as Serb nationalism was suppressed, Yugoslavia can remain in one piece. And I mean, that kind of turned out to be true. I mean, Milosevic was the first one who started with nationalism, and nationalism in Croatia was a response to nationalism in Serbia. And since then, like everything started to fall apart.
Yeah, so I'm conscious we're probably leaving Peter a bit out of this discussion. I apologize, Peter. So I'll try and move back to Hungary, but just sort of to wrap this up, um, why are we talking so much about Serbia, especially, and then linking that to Armenia? As I've said a number of times in various streams, is you not understand what happened in Crimea and in the Donbass in regards to the referendums and why the Russians felt so strongly about the international politics of it if you don't understand what happened in the former Yugoslavia and especially with what happened in Kosovo. Um, so this is the sort of internal boundaries of the former socialist back whenever Yugoslavia was still together under communist rule. You can see these are the national borders between the various nations that made up Yugoslavia, and then this dotted line shows these two then autonomous provinces within Serbia. And then this is the state of play in the region today. I don't know too much of why Montenegro and Serbia separated. I couldn't really give too much of a strong spiel on there, but as you can see, is that Yugoslavia is obviously it's now relegated to the history books, but Serbia is many Serbs now live outside of Serbia. Historically, Serbian lands are now separated from it. In fact, apart from Vojvodina, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I am aware there's a Hungarian minority there, but that's the only sort of autonomous part of Yugoslavia that still in any way, shape, or form is part of Serbia.
Yes, and there were no issues with Vojvodina. I mean, those are peaceful, educated people who just want peace. And unfortunately, in the past 10 years, a lot of them left. I mean, ethnic Hungarians moved to Hungary, and a lot of Serbs with Hungarian roots from Austro Hungary were able to obtain Hungarian citizenship, and but they mostly moved to Western Europe, in Austria, Germany, and a lot of them were even in United Kingdom. But I think that also one thing very important to mention is that breakup of Yugoslavia was not uh, under the international law, even in 1991, 1992, that international law was broken by the Western powers because uh, under the Yugoslav constitution, republics had no ability to separate from Yugoslavia. So
Yeah.
Slovenia and Croatia illegally uh, declared their independences, and it's very unfortunate that the Western powers recognized their independence within those socialist borders. I mean, those borders were drawn by the communists
Yeah,
and
so just to quickly outline on that point, so it's not the case anymore, but there used to be a significant number of Serbs that used to live within what is now the national borders of Croatia, to such an extent they tried to form their own independent sort of Serbian state during the, so this is why there was the Croatian War.
yes, and that was I think that Serb separatism in Croatia was response to Croatian separatism from Yugoslavia, because they wanted to live in Yugoslavia, and
Yeah.
when they had an option to live in
Again, I
Croatia,
hate to
which
interject
was
here, but also just bear in mind, kind of sounds similar to Russian nationalists and separatists in Crimea wanting to
yes,
be
but
part of Russia instead of Ukraine.
yes, but there is a huge difference between Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. Is that Russia recognized Ukraine and
Yeah,
Belarus within those borders, and Serbia never did that until 1995 when wars were finished. But in 1991, Serbia was not recognizing Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia. Only in 1995, after NATO intervention in Bosnia and after ethnic cleansing of Serbs in Croatia, because its Operation Storm was a Croatian operation against Serb rebels, where I think 300,000 Serbs were effectively expelled from Croatia. So mm, I think that international law was violated heavily from 1991 to 1995, way before Kosovo and bombing. But the problem was that it was a unipolar world, so only United States, NATO, and EU, when was formed, were deciding about fate. So Russia and China were not involved in any kind of resolution of Yugoslav crisis. So it was unilaterally, law was violated by Western powers, but no one cares about it anymore, unfortunately. And I mean, I wanted to point out difference because Russia recognized Ukraine within those borders, and after that they changed their mind,
yeah,
and
okay.
Serbia never recognized.
Mm,
Basically, was forced to recognize Croatia and Bosnia. So that's the huge difference. I mean,
okay.
I don't know. I mean, Russia voluntarily broke their uh, recognition. Uh,
Yeah.
I,
Well, I guess
I
in sort of the same way that Slovenia, Croatia, and other parts of the former Yugoslavia didn't have a legal mechanism to succeed from Yugoslavia, is it the kind of argument that could be made for Crimea in these parts of Ukraine, that there wasn't, is that because Ukraine is a unitary state, is that there was no mechanism for Crimea or the people in the Donbass to legally, if the correct word might be, if that's the correct word to even use, to ascertain what they felt that their self-determination in future should be. So I would say, obviously, former Yugoslavia collapsed into a horrific conflict, but, and I keep trying to make this point because I think it is pertinent. I think it's a large part of the Russian thinking behind everything is that Kosovo unilaterally declared independence as a protectorate of NATO. There was no referendum, there was no attempts at a legal settlement there. Whereas in Crimea, and to a degree in the Donbass, is that whatever your view of how legitimate those referenda were, is that at least there was some form of consultation with the local population as to the future of those territories.
Uh, well, again, I think that the thing is that Kosovo will remain legally part of Serbia as long as the resolution 1244 is in power,
Yeah.
because all resolutions from security councils are legally binding, and Kosovo cannot join the UN, it cannot join EU or join NATO, it cannot join anything because it's legally impossible. So it's not even a country as far as, I mean, everyone is
Yeah.
concerned. So it, I mean, it cannot have its own military. It cannot join Albania. That so it, effectively nothing has changed from 1999 and 2008 and so on. So I mean, the problem is that neither Serbs or Albanians can decide on their own fate, because their fate lies in Security Council, and Security Council is the one that can replace that resolution 1244. And since neither Serbia or Kosovo have a vote on that, basically Security Council can do whatever it wants, and uh, there is currently no willingness to change their resolution,
Yeah.
because I mean, uh, countries that are in the Security Council want Serbia and Kosovo to make some sort of agreement, and if all Security Council members agree with that agreement, then it will be adopted in the Security Council. But even if Serbia wants to recognize Kosovo, it effectively can't. So if even if Serbia says, okay, we recognize Kosovo, we want it to join the UN, if let's say China or Russia doesn't want it, it's impossible. So it's a very unique and specific situation. While let's say in Crimea, I mean, problem is there is no resolution in Security Council that affects Crimea. I mean, effectively, there's no difference between Crimea and let's say Donbass.
Yeah.
Under international law, it's Ukraine, and it will remain Ukraine as long as nothing changes. Because I mean, the situation is around Kosovo. It's so complicated, but I mean, its future lies in Security Council. No, nothing can change. While, for example, Russia can completely move out from Crimea, and it will be taken back by Ukraine, and as if nothing happens. While while NATO peacekeepers will remain in Kosovo as long as I mean, it's important to note that uh, KFOR, even though it's NATO-led peacekeeping army, it also contains members from other non-NATO states,
Yeah,
Ukraine,
so
for example.
just for a personal anecdote on that, my I have another family member who isn't my father. I've actually got lots of family members who've served in the military, but he actually was deployed as part of the British Army to KFOR. I'm just looking for the page for it now, and the medal he received for that, for his service in Kosovo as part of KFOR, was interestingly, it actually was a European Union medal, not a NATO medal.
Yes, currently I think that there is an attempt of EU of like nation building in Kosovo. It's called EU Lex. So they kind of try to implement rule of law in Kosovo, but all of those attempts are in vain. I mean, Kosovo is impoverished, it's corrupt, it's mm, organized crime is ruling
Uh,
the entire place. And one problem is that youth that lives in Kosovo, so young Albanians, I mean, they have no future. So politicians and their parents and their family are feeding them with hatred, and they are attacking like Serbian graveyards and throwing rocks at buses with like Serbian license plates. I mean, the longer the situation remains like this, there will be more radicalization, and a lot of young Albanians joined ISIS in Syria because uh, a lot of them, I mean, saw no future. So you cannot, if you have no job, you just take the opportunity. So I mean, the situation is so complex that I mean,
we could be here for
it cannot
hours
be
and days,
resolved.
basically.
Yes, but I don't think that coexistence of Serbs and Albanians is possible. So I think that a lot of Serbian nationalists are awaiting NATO dissolutions so they can expel Albanians to Albania and then move Serbs to Kosovo, and they see that as a solution.
Well, I guess on that point, like I say, I am conscious that this has taken up quite a while. So, Peter, if you're still with us,
Yes, I'm here. I was just muted.
okay, not a problem.
I was
Yes,
listening. It was quite interesting. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of left you a bit in the lurch for a while, but yeah. So I don't know really what else to continue on with that, but what an interesting part of the world that you and Milo happen to live in. I say this as someone who's come from the Yugoslavia of Western Europe, I guess the Bosnia of Western Europe from Northern Ireland with its own problems. But so I guess what I try and sort of bring you back into it. So what would you sort of see happening if Viktor Orban is, if he loses power? Let's say if it's a bit of an upset in the elections, or Hungarian Justin Trudeau happens to come to power, what do you sort of see the future, immediate future of Hungary being like, especially in regards to events just across the border in Ukraine?
well, that's well, basically either nothing or a lot, because I mean, the opposition coalition um, said a lot of things. They said they would start to transfer arms to the Ukraine, um, and you see, we have some things. Um, oh, how do I say that? Oh, yeah. Some of this stuff, for example, fuel and other, yeah, natural gas and some types of food are basically fixed price for now, or rather it have a maximum price because because the government anticipated it will be a small hump and we'll get over that. And uh, I think it's getting pricier and pricier to continue that. And
Yeah.
if the opposition uh, comes to be the government, then they will put an end to that immediately. And yeah, it will be painful for
Yeah.
everybody. So that's what I'm currently anticipating. Uh, Maybe not World War III at face value, but yeah, I wouldn't send arms to a conflict. Um, so, but the polls are quite um, mm, encouraging, promising. That's the word.
Okay.
They are promising because they say it will be a small Fidesz majority government, which would be very nice. Um, um, you see, the when the opposition last time, I mean the current opposition last time was in government, they created a depression before the collapse of the uh, building market, or I don't know how it how to say it. The U.S. Collapse, market
Yeah,
collapse.
the Great Recession of
So
2008.
yep. So uh, we was or we were in a depression before that. I mean, 2006. So yeah, I kind of anticipating something like that. And
Okay.
so the policies they put forward, basically they want to sell every asset of the nation, as they usually do. So um, uh, yeah, just I anticipating chaos basically.
Okay.
uh,
Fair enough. I hope it
uh,
doesn't come to pass. Like I say, I think I've kind of inculcated chat sort of my view, my ignorant view of at least anyway of where I would stand in politics. Just with that note, I am aware that this has gone on for quite a while, and I am aware that you guys are about 2 hours ahead of me. So I think it's coming up to 9 o'clock on your end. So um, I'm probably going to start wrapping up this part of the stream. If you guys want to hang about, you're more than welcome to, and we'll delve into the questions that chat might have. But if not, Peter, I don't know if you really have much of a public facing sort of internet presence. So I don't know if you like have a YouTube or a Twitter or anything you might want to shill for chat. Might want them to follow you on or
no, I just I just usually comment on stuff with my personal
fair
profile.
enough.
So
Okay, so I
not
guess
much of a presence.
fair enough. So I guess Milo, do you have anything that you would like to say to wrap up with chat, or any social media profiles you'd like to promote, or
No, I try to remain as anonymous as possible, and if I understood correctly, I mean I'm available all the time, so it's not I'm not in hurry.
okay, not a problem. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for coming on, and thank you very much, chat, for being here. I guess I will see you in the next stream. So see you then.